Okay. Good evening. We're going to start a series on the parables of Christ. And I want you to think about this. Why did Christ speak in parables? Why did he use parables? Answer these questions as we go along in your mind. What is a parable? Why do you think Christ taught with parables? Where did he get his background for teaching with this method? And why was he so effective in his use of using the parable for instruction? Brad Young, a scholar in Jewish history, says doubtless it was from the synagogue that Jesus first heard men talking in parables. Jesus used the parable to drive home his message about God and God's relationship to human beings. We must study the parables of Christ and their relationship with what is called Haggadah, or storytelling with a message. We find in Jewish culture many stories that were designed to teach a religious or ethical teaching. The Haggadah caught the heart of the hearer through imagination, just like some stories you had growing up. The Three Little Pigs, and Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We learned ethical lessons, some from that. And then when we got a little older, and some of us got a little more educated, we may have read Aesop's fables and learned how animals taught us something about being ethical. And then many of us may have read C.S. Lewis, and he used fables or animals to teach a lesson, give us something we understand, so that we can get the picture in our mind. And so we can see a parable as an artistic representation of life and how Christ explained life using these. James Boyce said a parable is a story taken from real life, or a real life situation from which a moral or spiritual truth is drawn. Christ used the human relationship in his parables. Jesus used 5 types of parables in his ministry: the parables of the kingdom, parables of salvation, parables of wisdom, parables of the Christian life, and parables of judgment. Today we're going to begin looking at the parables of the kingdom. And in Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 9, Christ gives us the parable of the soils. We too often look at that picture as if that soil had been prepared with one of the local farmers using a John Deere tractor and plowing that field up. And after he had plowed it up, it was neat. And then he planted the soil, planted the seeds in the soil just as he needed to. But that's not how it was in Christ's day. And as Christ was sitting in that boat that afternoon telling this story, this parable, the people could imagine in their minds what he was talking about. We don't see that picture unless we open our imagination up. Think of this. You got a field that's just been used. You go in and you chop everything down and you try to get as much out as you can. Then you start sowing your seed. You throw it out. And after you've thrown it out, some of it's going to fall in one place. You don't know where it's going to fall. It may fall over here. And it might be roots under there. Others are going to fall in some good soil. Some's going to fall on rock. And as we look at that, we we see that those seeds are just kind of sitting on top. And then that sower would come by with just some kind of little rake and spread things out a little bit more. But he had to wait till that first early rain to see which was going to grow. And some of it would grow very well. Some would start growing. But we have to see that picture. And so as Christ is trying to tell us with parables how to look at things, we need to look at the picture. And Christ gives us the 4 soils. The first soil was the one that was a hard heart. That was that hard soil that nothing would take root in. There was a woman who was asked one time why America was in such a declining moral state. She said, because people love sin. People love sin. They have hard hearts. The next type of soil was that shallow heart. The one where it started growing, but then it didn't grow long. The newness wore off, so to speak. The shallow heart. Then you got the strangled heart. The heart that is like so many of the lives of people today. They're choked by the riches of the world, strangled out. And then Christ talks about the open heart. The open heart. The heart that readily accepts Him, that readily accepts the Father. And Christ says that's the kind of heart that we need. We all love to hear stories, and nobody could tell them better than Christ. And as He tells us these stories, and as we go through our study of His parables, let's look forward to learning how Christ spoke to us. Thank you.